We've now reached 3:31, so we'll start. So yeah, look, take the time you need. If you're going for too long, I'll pull you up, but it'd be just really good. There's no rush in the first instance, just to get an orientation of what it is that you're bringing to the conversation, and it's an opportunity in the first instance just to sort of say, hey, this is what we've been doing, or this is my proposition, because you've all got, you could all hold an hour-long talk on your work. So but I'll give you at least 5 minutes, and then and we'll work it out from there, and then we'll move into more of a Q&A and conversational approach.
Glenn, can we share screen? I think some of us have some slides.
Yeah. So Myles, are you sharing slides?
I am. I've probably got about 10 minutes worth of stuff. Will that be okay?
Yeah, why not?
I'll whip through it a bit quicker.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we can always revisit in the Q&A if needed.
Cool.
Excellent. Okay, let me just bring this up.
Myles and Noel, I brought you into this very last minute, so I appreciate it's not kind of evolved in the co-created way I wanted it to. Anyway,
a pleasure.
You're ready to share slides, I think, and if so, I will officially open the session. So.
Okay, hold on a second.
Men's Health Connected, and this is the Men's Health Research Symposium, session 5 of the day, and we're looking at how we can work together and make collaboration work. Joining us in this session, we have Dr. Noel Richardson, Dr. Jacqui Macdonald, Dr. Kylie King, and opening up the conversation, we have Dr. Myles Young. Dr. Myles Young is a lecturer at the University of Newcastle School of Psychology. His work focuses on improving men's health through gender-targeted and sustainable weight loss programs. Now, in terms of collaboration, Myles has got a focus on how we can do collaboration across different disciplines. In his case, disciplines like men's health, physical activity, nutrition and dietetics, psychology, psychiatry, and exercise physiology. Dr. Myles Young, over to you.
Thanks very much, Glenn. I've shared some slides here. Obviously still getting my head around Zoom. Can I just confirm that you can see the slides, and it's not the background view, is it, with all the notes and everything? It's excellent. Okay, so yeah, thanks very much for this opportunity to present some of my recent work. I'm going to be talking about some findings from a recent study we ran called Shed It Recharge, which was a gender-tailored weight loss intervention for men, specifically targeting men with recent low mood. And I thought this would be an appropriate thing to talk about today because it really involved a multidisciplinary team of experts that I worked with. And I was really fortunate to be mentored by and to work with these people. You can see Professor Phil Morgan there. He's a men's health and physical activity researcher. Claire Collins is in nutrition. Robin Callister's in exercise physiology, and then Brian Kelly and Francis K. Lampkin are in the School of Psychiatry here at Newcastle, and then my PhD student Ryan Drew, who once upon a time was actually a PE teacher. So we've got the whole gamut sorted, and it was a really interesting project. A bit of background, you may have covered some of this today, but depression is obviously a big problem in Australian men. 1 in 8 will be diagnosed with depression, but it's likely there are a lot more cases as men are less likely to come forward and accurately disclose their symptoms in a lot of cases. Men with overweight and obesity are actually at a particularly high risk for depression. A huge meta-analysis with nearly 60,000 people found that those who were overweight or obese were actually 31% more likely to develop depression over time. And interestingly, it's sort of a reciprocal relationship where those with depression were also more likely to develop overweight or obesity. So innovation is really needed to target this group for their mental and physical health. As we know, mental and physical health are really tightly intertwined, particularly with men. But there are a lot of poor health behaviours common in Australian men. You can see most not meeting the guidelines for physical activity, fruit and vegetables. Almost half are having regular sleep issues, and then we've got some problems with alcohol as well. These behaviours are associated with both weight and depression, which says there's potentially an opportunity to target both at the same time. A recent scoping review of men's mental health of different interventions actually reported in their discussion that potentially one of the best ways that we can improve men's mental health is by targeting things not even related to mental health, specifically singling out physical health as a way to engage men. It looked like there was a real potential in these physical health promotion programs for mental health outcomes. However, even in the lifestyle kind of weight loss world, only about 1/4 of participants in research projects are men. Most programs are also not scalable at the population level. And a recent systematic review my PhD student Ryan just completed found that although male-only behaviour change programs have some impact on men's mental health, very few have actually included direct integration of that mental health care support too. In my PhD and postdoc, I focused on a gender-tailored weight loss program called Shed It. The idea was to provide men with sort of standard health information for how to lose weight. There's no magic powder, potion or pill, but sort of try and how do we provide these health messages in ways that are socio-culturally relevant, engaging for men to make sure that they can make these changes and engage with the resources. Interestingly, the program, as well as having a pretty good impact on mental health, on weight loss, despite being a self-help program, self-help online program, we actually found some sort of early evidence that it had an improvement on men's mood. That was what I detected during my PhD, but the outcomes were quite sort of short-term, and we didn't have a control group for that particular part of the study. So I was able to leverage that data into a new RCT, which I ran in my postdoc, where I got this great multidisciplinary team together, which was Shed It Recharge. What if we made this program specifically designed for men with low mood or risk for developing depression, integrating mental health support? What impact would that have on weight loss and mental health? And that project was funded by a Deakin Group through a donation to Hunter Medical Research Institute and the Heart Foundation. I won't bore you too much with the design, but it was a rigorous design. We had an RCT, it was 6 months. The program was 3 months in duration, so we had some follow-up in there, and we had a lot of safety protocols in place, blinded assessors, and we followed best practice to ensure the data were quite rigorous. We had a sort of a wide range of criteria for inclusion. One that I just want to highlight is that for depression, we recruited men that had a score on the patient health questionnaire 9 of 5 or above, which usually indicates mild symptoms. A score of 10 on the PHQ, if you score that, you're pretty likely to get diagnosed with major depression if you go and see a mental health professional. But a score of 5 generally indicates mild depression too. We also didn't exclude men for taking antidepressant medication or therapy if those things were stable. That was really important for the sort of generalizability of the findings. And also we didn't want to say to people that this was a clinical treatment for depression. So we really focused on it as more of an adjunct. We didn't want people to change what they were already doing if that was just a stable thing. The program itself, again, it was an online program to try and make it quite scalable. Although they did get some printed resources sent to them too. One of these was our guide to physical and mental fitness. So we took all of the program from our original Shed It program, and we decided to focus on physical and mental fitness. We had a particular emphasis on behaviours linked to depression in men, like physical activity, risky alcohol use. And we also designed 4 online modules that men could complete, which just targeted what we called mental fitness strategies. And these were things from cognitive behaviour therapy, like cognitive restructuring and that kind of thing. So rather than your behaviours, how can you change your thoughts, which has a direct impact on your emotions and your behaviours, mindfulness and those kind of concepts. And the CBT, cognitive behaviour therapy, is really good for men because it sort of aligns with their desire for hands-on support and action-oriented. We also gave them a logbook where they could complete key tasks relating to the program. That might have been about weight loss. They could, as in documenting your weight each week, or it also may have been some of these thought diaries that aligned with the mental fitness strategies. You can see on the left there, that's one of our online modules. You could do that on the computer, on your mobile phone, on the iPad. We used a program that was, it looked good no matter what you were using, and there was interactive elements, quizzes, and we had a website where they could do some, online resistance training and some other instructional videos. And they used MyFitnessPal, which was a freely available app or website platform to track physical activity and dietary behaviour for weight loss. A really important part of the program was we integrated men's preferences and values into the program itself. Some standard things that men have valued in health communications, like humour, focusing on the science behind the program, you know, a frank and realistic communication. Everything you do to lose weight, you've got to be prepared to do for the rest of your life, that kind of thing, and providing a lot of flexibility. As a quick overview of our sample, it was broadly representative of men in Newcastle. Had 125. We were able to recruit them and assess them in just under 2 months. 85% were born in Australia. Only 3% were Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. That's sort of broadly representative in Newcastle too. We had a range of men from across different socioeconomic quintiles. You can see obviously most from the middle, but we were able to recruit around over 75% from the low to middle groups, which was great. You can see from our data that about 70% of the men were obese at baseline, and 40% of the men were in that moderate to severe range for depression. About 1 in 4 had recent thoughts of suicide. That wasn't all from the group with moderate to severe depression, some from the mild group as well. We had a psychologist on board that was able to talk to those men to make sure they were okay and had support. So you can see from our weight loss findings, these are really good for an online self-directed program. The men had lost about 3.6 kilograms more than the control group at our 6-month assessment, which is clinically meaningful. In terms of our depression, you can see our black circles are our intervention group there. And they've moved away from that 10 cutoff for where you're at risk for major depression down towards more closer to 5. So they halved their symptoms. And that was statistically significant compared to our control group as well. Our effect size of 0.5 was really good because usually effect size of 0.2 is enough to justify the use of an antidepressant medication. So 0.5 is really good in that context. I'll breeze through a little bit of this stuff so I don't go over time, but generally enjoyed the program. Even though we had the mood improvements, some of them didn't sort of think that they'd learned strategies to improve their mood, which maybe speaks to the physical health elements, and mostly they were satisfied. This was some really nice feedback we had from a participant just to sort of show the impact. I won't read through it all, but you can see those themes there of becoming a better man, happier, the man he always wanted to be, a better father, and he got his life back from doing this sort of physical health program. So we had some good strengths for the program. A diverse team really helped with developing the materials and consulting on a lot of the key issues. It was able to achieve clinically meaningful outcomes at quite a low cost. We had no contact with participants between assessments unless there was something going wrong. And there's a lot more work to do. We're going to look at how this program worked, which parts were the most important. And I've got my PhD student, Ryan, looking at the key behaviours that can explain some of these effects. So thanks for your attention, and happy to take questions now or later on, Glenn, depending on how you want to go.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Myles. We'll do later. So that gives you an understanding of where Dr. Myles Young is coming from and what he's bringing to the conversation. That focus there on physical health, though clearly overlapping with mental health, and also in terms of the collaboration piece, which is what we're focusing on for this final session, bringing, I guess you'd say, the interdisciplinary approach, so bringing people from different disciplines together to work on an outcome that improves men's health. So next on our panel, I'm going to go to Dr. Jacqui Macdonald. And the reason that we invited Jacqui in particular is because of the work of the Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium, where she's created this incredible machine process of different groups of researchers sort of working step by step. I'm sure she'll describe it in much more scientific and accurate language than me saying it's some kind of amazing research sausage factory. But to introduce you properly and formally, Jacqui Macdonald is a senior research fellow in developmental psychology at Deakin University, and she leads a body of research on paternal perinatal mental health and wellbeing, and sits on the steering committee of the Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium. Jacqui Macdonald, over to you. Are you sharing slides? I think you said you were, didn't you?
Yeah, I will. Thanks, Glenn.
I was all smooth and professional then, and then I realised I haven't actually
Can I do that?
shared the slide bit with you. So we go. You should be able to do that now. Yeah, you're there.
Okay, so there we go. All right, so as Glenn said, I'll be talking to you about the Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium. And just start by saying, we're a group of researchers from around Australia, but we're not just researchers, we're also practitioners and people involved in dads groups and policy, and anyone who's kind of interested in this space seems to have joined in, and I'll talk a little bit about the inclusivity of it and why that matters as I go through. But our aims are to advance the science of fatherhood, to support practice and policy that supports men and their families, and to promote the healthy inclusion of fathers in family life. So I'll talk to you a little bit about how the Fatherhood Research Consortium came to be. We've been around officially, I guess, since 2017. In 2016, at the University of Newcastle, where Myles is sitting now, Richard Fletcher, who works at the Family Action Centre, brought a group of researchers from around Australia to meet, of people who had an interest in fatherhood research. And we had one day there, and we all just met each other, talked about what we were interested in, and we walked away from that thinking, this is actually a fabulous group of people who are all interested in a similar space. But again, we were from multiple disciplines, and we had one day together, and it was a little bit difficult to know how we'd work together in the future. Richard was really just doing the introductions. And in fact, he set up a kind of speed dating for us, where we all were to put into a basket the names of a couple of people that we'd like to catch up with again in the future, spend some more time with, if you will, and he passed those names on to us, and we would send each other emails afterwards. So it was a kind of anonymous, I'd really like to talk more with that person. And we did a bit of that, and I caught up with a couple of people that I had spoken to there. And it was interesting because we spoke, and we could see that we had common values, common interests, but we were still a little bit unsure of how we'd collaborate. We sort of thought, well, maybe this will just happen by osmosis. But another thing that came out of that meeting, another two things. One was that there was a sense that there needed to be some kind of formal grouping of fatherhood researchers in Australia, and that there also needed to be more time next time we met together, that it was a bit of a rush to fly into Newcastle and fly out again on that day. So the following year, the same group of people, most of the same group of people, plus some more, met in Melbourne, and we set up 2 days. And we decided that we would try and form some groupings where we'd just have a chat a bit about what it was that we wanted to do, and how we could actually build some collaborations together. So the aim of the symposium that we held, and the aim of the symposia that we've held since then, is really to share and disseminate research and program information on fatherhood, and to support evidence-based practice and policy. And we wanted to facilitate the building of research and practice collaborations if we possibly could. So in that sense, Richard particularly has been very good at that in saying to people involved in fatherhood practice, come along, we want to share, we want to collaborate, we want to hear what's going on in the field, and we want to let people in the field know what it is that we've been researching so that we're not sitting in these silos. So we came together, and we had a number of different areas of interest. So I've noted a few there. So attachment, drug and alcohol use, paternal mental health, breastfeeding, child development, masculinity, family violence, child obesity, all sorts of different things. And we worked in public health and psychology and social work and anthropology, and there was peer support groups. And so it was a range of different people. And also the geography of it. We had a number of people coming from Western Australia. So, you know, even just collaborating across the vast distance of our country was always going to be, you know, a little bit challenging as well. So at that meeting, what we did was we formed ourselves into 3 groups, and we just did that on the basis of those of us who were kind of leading this. We said, oh, well, I primarily work in life course research and longitudinal studies. So I said, anybody who's interested in this, come into a working group session, just an hour and a half session with me, and we'll chat together and we'll see if we can come up with something. And somebody else wanted to form a group around measurement, and Richard, for those of you who know him, runs a program called SMS for Dads. And he was interested in people who might be interested in that program and use of technology and collaborating. So we went into these groups and we all introduced ourselves and we talked about what we did, and we kind of jotted down lots of ideas, but it was still kind of difficult to get a sense of what we would do together. And I think what was important to all of us is we had the sense of we were coming together, but we didn't want to just, we did present to each other. We have these terrific quick poster presentations. Everybody gets to talk and to share a bit of their research and the work that they do. But we wanted to really formalise something, to create something where we could create, to produce outputs and do something quite meaningful. So we had those individual groups, and then we came back to this session that we call, it's now actually kind of legendary at the Fatherhood Symposium each year. It's the round table. It's like a big dinner table at the end of a family gathering, and we all chat about what's been going on. The arrow in the middle actually does represent a night of drinks in between, which was actually very helpful in the building of collaborations and finding out what was going on as well and where we might move. But when we came back to this round table, we talked about wanting to find something where we could converge upon an idea that we could all work on. We could practice collaborating together to see whether it would work. So from Richard's speed dating the year before, we wanted to see how these relationships might actually evolve and whether, you know, did we like each other? Do we really want to keep going out together? And this was the idea that we came across. You can probably see yourselves on that screen, can you? I might move this across. There we go. The thing that mattered to everybody was sleep. And that's probably why. That's how a lot of us felt, actually. For some reason, let me see. I've moved your... No? There we go, sorry. So why did we come across sleep as an idea that mattered to us all? And I guess it's because sleep affects everyone and everything is affected by sleep. So sleep deficiency, you know, it's important in parents' relationships and their irritability, anger, anxiety, depressive symptoms, conflict, blaming, sexual desire. It creates environments of stress and it's related to poorer child outcomes. And we found out that actually in the year prior to this particular meeting that how to get my baby to sleep was the single most searched question on Google by Australian parents. So Myles, you said you've got a 2-year-old, you might have Googled that one yourself. So it was relevant to our diverse interests and disciplines. So even if you're working in physical health, in nutrition, I think you mentioned it yourself, that sleep was you know, relevant to the work you're doing as well. So it became a point of convergence for us. So what we did, we also said, well, we all work in different areas. Not only do we have different interests that we generally work in, we also focus or have different methodologies that we tend to gravitate towards. So we decided to create these working groups that really reflect the movement of knowledge across the spectrum in research. So from what we already know, to what matters, to what works, and to what translates. And to cover those groups, we started with a literature review group. We also formed a data and analysis group, and the data and analysis group, our focus is to use secondary data, so existing data sets, and find so data that's already been collected and analyse it for the purposes of the research question that we had. And then there were people there who were particularly involved in intervention work. So for them, what they've been focusing on is formative work for interventions around focus groups, and setting up collaborations within field sites where we can speak to fathers and to people who work with fathers about the impact of sleep on things like mental health. And then a scientific communications group. So a group that can say, well, here's what we know now, what translates. And that scientific communications group began focusing mostly on things like, how we disseminate the work that we do, but has moved also into, and this is partially because people like Glenn have been involved in the work that we do, how we can actually contribute towards the policy discussion as well. So our membership sort of strategically aligned themselves because of their expertise and their experience, and because of the developing interests into one or two, or sometimes all of the groups for some people. So it looked for the first year or so like as though sleep was all we did and all we were interested in, but it's really just the first domain that we took on, and we took it on, as I said, because it was an area that many of our areas could also converge on. And it's allowed us to test this model, does it work? And there are multiple other domains that we can explore, and this year, in our 2020 online version of the symposium that we had a couple of months ago, we've now started that process, and I'll mention that in a second, around what else we'll do. And so the first part of it was just learning, what does that collaboration look like, what works, what doesn't work, how do we work together? And I can tell you that we work very successfully together. So on the left here, you can see from our literature review group, our very first publication as a consortium. And you can actually see that the Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium is even named on the publication. It was a scoping review looking at sleep, mental health, wellbeing among fathers of infants up to 1 year postpartum. And while that review was being undertaken, we've been working on another project, which is a cross-cohort analysis. We brought 4 existing cohorts together from around Australia, and we looked at the question of whether you can ask fathers a single question about sleep as a potential form of inquiry, a screener, if you like, in what we're calling a form of sensitive inquiry, as a gateway question for screening mental health. So this particular paper is now in the revise and resubmit stage at a major journal. So we're really proud of that one as well. So this is where we're at the moment. We worked out that literature review process really works. And we have now asked people who want to be involved in that, and we've shown them the process. We talked it through this year, and we have 2 new reviews in the planning stages now. Data and analysis, we've found that we can take on existing data sets. That for that particular one, we did cross-cohort analysis. We took similar data from 4 different cohorts, and we meta-analysed it. So we aggregated that, and we could find and report on more robust findings in relation to mental health and sleep. And now we're going to look to 10 to Men, which is the national study of Australian men's health, to look at the fathers in the first year postpartum and some analysis with that data. Our intervention group, those of you who work in the intervention space will know that takes longer than just about anything else that you can do. So these poor guys feel like they've been in it for the long haul, but they now actually have about 5 sites across Australia where they're working with focus groups, and I think that one of the sites has actually collected their data already, and ethics has been approved for the others. So they're continuing on with their first work around sleep. And the scientific communications group, while it was mostly focused on things like, look, they did some terrific work in the first year in things like Twitter discussions and some podcasts, some really interesting kind of innovative ways of getting fatherhood research out there. But one of the things that's really a fabulous resource for the consortium is the Australian Fatherhood Research Bulletin, which Richard Fletcher produced from the Family Action Centre for many years, but he's now handing that over to the consortium. So we're taking that on, and we're at the moment thinking about a sort of a relaunch of that. And we've formed special interest groups as well. So one of the things I've mentioned is that we want to be inclusive. One of the really interesting questions is, how do you do that? A lot of people enter the space with momentary enthusiasm. We can feel very inspired while we're there. But these working groups have had people in it for the long haul, and every single person has contributed. They've included it as part of their workload, and people who actually don't have it on their formal workload are doing this at night time on weekends. There's commitment and dedication and passion, and it's actually really motivating and energising, but as all of you know who work in the space as well, it's kind of depleting as well. And so then people say, well, I want to step up and I want to do something, but I'm interested in something else. What can I do? And it really requires a champion for each role. So in each of these working groups, we've had somebody, at least a single person, who has chaired those roles, and new people coming forward are being told, well, if you want to lead a systematic review, you need to lead it. And we'll help you now that we understand the processes of how these collaborations work. But a champion needs to be a champion and to really get behind a project.
Jacqui, I need to wrap you up.
Yep.
Is there a way of bringing it to a conclusion for now?
Sure. So, well, I can finish here if you like. These were just a couple of slides on some of the things around why we collaborate. And
sure.
So the gaps of knowledge are bigger than the ones that any one of us can fill. Complexity, we tackle a single question in depth through multiple disciplinary lenses, a range of expertise, and working from conception to translation. We operate at multiple sites, so this is reach, and increasing reach into communities with different needs. We're interested in impact, so we can provide bi-directional guidance. Practitioners inform researchers what they need to understand to make a difference, and researchers inform practitioners about what's understood, about what matters and what looks promising for interventions. For researchers ourselves, we're interested in our tracks. Researchers can build collaborative tracks together, demonstrating capacity to work strategically and meaningfully together. We're also really interested in that space in mentoring. So we're bringing doctoral students together, and they're helping each other screen for systematic reviews and getting on each other's papers. We want outcomes, so working group model sets achievement targets with clear outcomes and purposes. And it's about collegiality. I mean, we love that side of it, the support, the engagement, mentoring among passionate people with common aims. And of course, our voice. Many voices are louder than one in raising the profile of fatherhood concerns.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jacqui. As I said, an awesome research sausage factory. I've got that in real simple terms that I can understand as well. Those four aspects, what we know, what matters, what works, and what translates. It's really, really interesting to see how that has the persistence and the commitment that has enabled that model to evolve over the last couple of years, and a great privilege to be a very small part of one of those groups and see that system unfold. So we've had so we're looking at collaboration and how can we collaborate in the research field. Our next panelist then is Dr. Kylie King, another researcher I've had some experience of collaborating with.
Yes.
On the place where on the place where people like I normally get shoved, which is on the community reference group. And it was a great experience. My first real beginning to end community reference group experience, and learned loads and thoroughly enjoyed the process. So Dr. Kylie King is a senior research fellow at the Turner Institute for Brain and Mental Health at Monash Uni. And Kylie led an RCT that evaluated the impact of the Man Up documentary, which Professor Jane Perkins named as a sort of the highlight of her work so far earlier on. That documentary focused on men's help seeking, and she also led a qualitative study that explored older men's views about aging and suicide, which I had the pleasure of being on the reference group for. Over to you. And Kylie, today you're going to talk about, I think, potential overlaps between academia, industry and community.
Yes, I am, Glenn. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I'm trying to share my screen with you. Is that working?
Yeah, it is.
Come on, slideshow. Oh, I hate when it does this. How do you get it to, how do you get it to not show the presenter view? Oh, doesn't matter, does it?
Kylie, I before I shared the slides, I set that up, and then when I went to pick the screen, I could pick the one which was the full screen.
Oh, right.
If you want to do that.
Oh, goodness. I don't want to waste any time. Don't. Is everyone all right looking at this? I'll keep moving. I don't want to waste everybody's time. So I was going to talk to you today about collaborations between researchers and community with a view to improving men's mental health. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert on the topic, but I can talk to you about things I've picked up along the way and things that I've learnt about collaboration. So the way I see it, there's some really pressing questions for men's mental health at the moment. We really need to understand more about what works to improve men's mental health. So I should say, Glenn introduced me, but largely my research is in suicide prevention with men, and mostly I'm interested in implementing an evaluation of interventions. So I'm really interested in this question of what works to improve mental health. And we really don't know enough about it, and we need to know more about not only what works, but how does it work, why does it work, who does it work for, how can we make it work better, what else could work, and most importantly, how can we share this knowledge, because there's so many great interventions in Australia and internationally that are in men's mental health. And they're all doing great things, but we don't always know about them, and they're hard to tap into that knowledge. So that's the pressing questions as I see it. And I think that a collaboration between research and community, and when I say community, I guess as a researcher, I mean anyone that's not me. So it includes, health services, community members, industry, businesses, not-for-profit businesses. It's a whole range of community. And so there's a great potential here for these two parties to come together to answer these questions. So research funders are increasingly looking for research that's undertaken with community partners and has real-world impacts that can be translated into the benefits for the community. So researchers spend a lot of time applying for research funding, and this is part of what we're increasingly being asked to do. On the flip side of that, I hear that from community that they're interested to know more about the impact of their services and being able to demonstrate that, the evidence base behind their services, and even assistance to develop new services that are evidence informed. So you can already see that there's a big overlap here, and actually there's a common goal there, and there's great potential for collaborations between research and community to answer these questions. So what can collaborations achieve? And obviously the list is way more bigger than this, but in terms of sort of as a researcher, a collaboration between researchers and community can achieve a lot of things. The sort of things that a collaboration could achieve might be a review of literature to determine the evidence base relevant to a particular service or industry, evaluation of existing programs, which can help for program improvement, as well as making the case for more funding, informing the development and further rollout of programs, designing and piloting new programs as well. Often services might have an idea of something they want to try, but not quite sure about the best way to go about it or the evidence behind it. Obviously, researchers are really interested in contributing to the knowledge base. That's kind of what we live for. But this is also about informing services and strengthening the case for new services. So working together can also help increase the capacity of the community in research and evaluation, so to upskill people within services so that they can do some of this work in an ongoing way. And I think what's really important is, from my point of view, it's about providing researchers that are a resource for the community. So we're not sitting in universities and our institutions building the knowledge base, but we're actually of use to our community. And of course, this all takes time and money, and funding is very important. So collaborations can be used to get more funding for services and for research. So I was going to give you quickly 2 examples of collaborations that I've been involved in between research and community. One was the Man Up project that Glenn just mentioned, which was the development and evaluation of a new intervention via collaboration. And a new project that I'm working on, which is an evaluation of Tomorrow Man's Breaking the Man Code workshops, which is an existing program being implemented by Tomorrow Man. So Man Up, as Glenn just told you, was a media-based suicide prevention project. So what happened was the Movember Foundation, and it's a great example of a collaboration because there was a lot of different partners involved. So the Movember Foundation put out a big call for research funding for ideas about improving men's mental health. Jane Perkis led the charge and put together a great application that was successful. So that's us there at University of Melbourne, which I was there then. And we collaborated with Ares Films, who are an independent film production company. And also, ultimately, we paired with the ABC as well. So together with Ares Films, we developed Man Up, which was a 3-part documentary, and there's a brief description of it there on the side, surrounded by a social media campaign. And the ABC showed this documentary on television in 2016 across 3 weeks. So it was an interesting collaboration. So we developed a product from scratch. And obviously there were lots of challenges in that collaboration in trying to meet all the different needs of the stakeholders. Obviously we wanted something that was evidence-based. The Movember Foundation needed something that was in keeping with their vision for men's health. Ares Films wanted to create an entertaining product, and the ABC wanted people to view it. So there were lots of challenges with the collaboration. However, it was really successful, and we achieved a lot more together than we could have ever achieved separately. So the researchers sitting at their computers were able to demonstrate the impact of Man Up through an RCT. So we were able to show that the viewers of the documentary had an increased likelihood of seeking help, recommending that others seek help, and more awareness, openness and supporting of others. But through the Ares Films and their PR people, they were able to get this out into the world for us. So there was a Facebook community, a Twitter account that reached over nearly 2.5 million people. There was a campaign ad that went viral and was viewed over 54 million times globally. So you can see that combination of research and community was able to develop a product that worked and actually had an impact because it got out there into the world. So just talking to you briefly now about the second example of a collaboration. So Tomorrow Man actually featured in Man Up. They deliver workshops to schools throughout Australia with young men. So boys in year, I think it's 10, 11 and 12. And they talk to them about the man code. So connect the idea about the pressures on boys and men to behave in a certain way and how that affects their well-being. So this program was already existing, and we had an existing relationship with Tomorrow Man from Man Up. And so now we're doing an evaluation of the workshop. So I thought it might just be interesting just to talk you a little bit through the process of collaboration. So we drew on that pre-existing relationship with Tomorrow Man, and we became aware of Vic Health Impact Research Grants that was interested in masculinities. So we got together with Tomorrow Man and came up with a plan of how we would evaluate the workshops. So we applied for funding in a collaboration, in a partnership. And this is an example of how, a community need for evidence base for their intervention is coupled with researchers to join in together to make an application for funding. So we applied to Vic Health, but we failed. So then we tried again to the Australian Rotary Health Mental Health of Young Australians project grants, and we applied and we were successful. So we got the money, and now we're in the process of planning for that evaluation. But I think that's just a lovely example of a need that's in the community to build the evidence base for their confidence in their workshop, to give the information they need to inform the quality of their future work, and combine that with researchers who can bring the evidence base and the resources to be able to evaluate the project. So I think this is a model that could be used with lots of other collaborations between research and community to fill that gap about what we need to know about what works in men's mental health interventions. So I thought I'd just maybe give you a little bit of, this is kind of my thinking about what we know has kind of worked in helping our collaborations work. So I think it's important to acknowledge that different parties have different needs. So as I said at the beginning, obviously researchers have very different needs to the ABC, who just want people to watch the documentary, or Tomorrow Man, who are really a business and of course are needing to, be profitable and have employees. And so we all have different needs, but we can work towards a common goal. And the common goal, of course, in all of these is about having interventions that work, that have an impact, that people want to be engaged with. So you can't underestimate the importance of relationship building, regular meetings and updates, coming together really early in the project to come up with the research questions and the methods. So this idea of coming up with a study that's actually going to work in the real world and research questions that are actually going to be relevant to everybody. It's really important. I mean, Glenn spoke about his role in one of our projects was on our advisory group, and that's a really good way to keep connected between researchers and community. And it's important, and more and more when you apply for funding for projects, you can now you can often budget that into your project so that it becomes a fundamental part of the project, as can the involvement of lived experience expertise, which is so important to make sure that the project is relevant and will be effective for the people that need it. It's important to use multiple data sources. Obviously, us researchers love our scales and surveys, but it's important to use a range of different data sources because different things will be important to different people. Like we were just, thrilled to pieces to be able to write a journal article about our trial and demonstrate changes in help seeking. The Movember Foundation loved our research about the social media campaign, and that we could demonstrate the reach on Facebook and Twitter, and that was really meaningful for them. The ABC were really interested to know that, people loved it. They could release some of our findings early to help them promote the documentary. It's important to work together on knowledge translation, a plan for how the knowledge will be translated into action. And I know I'm running out of time, so my last point is compromises. And I suppose that's the push and pull of collaborations. We had to do the trial really very rapidly, a lot faster than we would have liked to because we wanted to get that information out there so the ABC could use it. And again, compromising on research questions and methods to be sure that everybody's needs are being met. So I think that's it for me. Good. I could talk a lot more, but that'll do it.
Cool. That's excellent. So who'd have thought when we just talked collaboration, there'd be so many different ways of talking about it, and we haven't finished talking about it yet. So Dr. Noel Richardson is here for a few reasons. One is because he's an absolute legend who agreed at very short notice to step in when our colleague, Dr. Neil Hall at the Men's Health Information Resource Centre had to pull out. But that's just the tip of a very big iceberg. Noel probably wrote the first world's national men's health policy in Ireland, has gone through the process of not only ensuring there were two policies, but also been engaged in what it actually takes to deliver policies and make them work and go beyond just being a nice bit of paper that sits on a shelf somewhere. And more recently was involved in the development of men's health strategy across Europe with the World Health Organization European division, which covers more than 50 countries. So he probably has more experience of collaborating to create men's health policy and strategy at a national level than any man in any known universe living. And that's just what I know about him. I'm sure he's done a bit of collaboration with a few other people that I don't even know about. And bizarrely, whilst we live just a few hundred miles apart for much of our lives, I think and we work in the same very small sector, Noel. I think the only time we've been in the same building, possibly, was in Australia when I flew over from England and you flew over from Ireland to be at the 2013 National Men's Health Gathering. If we've sat together somewhere and had a long conversation in the past and I've forgotten, I apologise now. That's my introduction. Let me do the formal one. This is Dr. Noel Richardson, and he is Director of healthCORE at the Institute of Technology in Carlow, Ireland, where it is currently probably just about 7 a.m. Thank you, Noel. Noel has worked on 2 national men's health policies and has collaborated with the World Health Organization on a men's health strategy for the HUE European region. What can you tell us about collaboration in the world of making men's health work, Noel?
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, good afternoon. It's morning time here. I don't have any slides because, as Len said, I came in at kind of as a late sub. So I'm just going to reflect on some of those experiences of both developing policy in Ireland, and we've kind of had about 10 years of implementation at this stage. And in a way, I've been kind of wearing a couple of hats. During that time, I've been working in academic institutions, so I see myself as a researcher, I suppose, principally, but I've also been seconded half-time to the Department of Health in Ireland. So I've had that kind of unique opportunity to sit on both sides of the table and, you know, be involved as a researcher as my day job, if you like, but also then flipping over to work with the kind of complex challenges of policy development and policy implementation. And I guess I've also been an advocate for men's health. I seem to be an advocate. My experience is there's a small pool of people working in the field. So, I mean, it's all shoulders to the wheel most of the time for any projects that happen, especially in Ireland. It's such a small place. The first point I'd like to make is actually that in late 2008, early 2009, we launched our national men's health policy in Ireland, and it coincided with the financial crisis. So in a way, we were forced into collaboration and partnership from the outset. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of money that was allocated for the new strategy. In fact, the minister at the time didn't want to publish the policy because there wasn't money available, and it didn't want to be seen as another policy that was going to be ineffective. So that was a real challenge. But in a way, it forced us to be creative. It forced us to look for opportunities to see how we could work together. And I mean, one of the key learnings is from my point of view, is that how can implementation of potential elements of national men's health policy serve a dual purpose of advancing other policy priority areas? And that's been a key learning, not just within health, but across other government departments as well. And in fact, if I start by just citing a couple of examples of projects I'm involved in at the moment, I've got 3 PhD students at the moment, and 2 of them are working with the Department of Agriculture, actually, and on farmers' health projects. One is a capacity building project where we're aiming to train 800 agricultural advisors to have a kind of a health champion role on engaging with farmers, you know, and a kind of signposting, you know, supporting farmers through farm discussion groups and one-on-one consultations. And the other one is a cardiovascular prevention program involving 900 farmers. That's a collaboration between the Irish Heart Foundation, Glanbia, which is a big agri-food business, the health services, and academic institutions. And again, the other agricultural one is with the main farming bodies, and the Department of Agriculture are funding it jointly with the Department of Health. So these are good examples of where, you know, collaboration and partnership are hugely important in dealing with, I think Jacqui talked about it earlier, the complex problems. And collaboration and partnership is the only way to deal with really complex problems where there are huge health inequities, you know, and without bringing a lot of partners on board from the outset, well, then it's very unlikely to achieve any kind of success. So one of my kind of key learnings from working in partnership, a lot of the things have been mentioned already, but I think community engagement is hugely important. Getting community buy-in from the key stakeholders, empowering the community and ensuring that there's a sense of ownership in whatever the program that you're trying to develop, that the community feels a sense of ownership. Champions and ambassadors are really important to get buy-in for the program, and peer support. We have another project ongoing at the moment. It's a health promotion program with the Irish Men's Sheds Association, and those latter 2 points are hugely important. Having champions, ambassadors within the sheds regionally that serve as a kind of a mediator between this health promotion program and how it will be accepted within the sheds, and also having kind of peer support within the sheds, which actually speaks very much to the whole ethos and culture within sheds. So that kind of community engagement piece is really important. Kylie also spoke about kind of what I call mission alignment, you know, and there'll always be different needs from different partners and different stakeholders, but it's really important to invest in some kind of shared vision, having shared principles and values for the work. And I believe strongly in actually committing this to print before projects start, but, you know, by having a memorandum of understanding or some kind of contractual arrangement so that everyone acknowledges what their need is, but there's some kind of common buy-in to some shared values and core principles that are instrumental to the project. Nearly all the speakers have spoken about leadership as being really important, and having, you know, a clear sort of strong leadership function within partnership and collaboration is hugely important. And I think some of the things I've talked about, you know, investing in collaboration and partnership is hugely important for sustainability as well. So that researchers don't just come in and do the work and leave, but that there's some commitment to ensuring that the work has a longevity beyond the duration of the project, and that the sustainability is built into it. Just a couple of other reflections. I'm conscious of time. Capacity building has been a hugely important pillar of our men's health policy implementation. And I've mentioned the work with the agricultural advisors, with the Department of Agriculture, and that ties into a national men's health training program called Engage in Ireland. And we've had over 1,200 frontline service providers trained over the last 7 or 8 years now on a general program, but that has morphed now into, there's a program for young men, mental health, there's a program for middle-aged men, there's a new program, as I said, being developed and designed for agricultural advisors. So this has been hugely important in terms of building capacity to support the implementation of key priorities in men's health policy, and having kind of allies and advocates that are pushing the kind of national men's health policy agenda. Final point for now, research and evaluation has been hugely important. And again, like some of the previous speakers, I think a key model is where researchers work with like, say, the community voluntary sector, with NGOs and with statutory health services. So you build that kind of partnership model, and that serves us really well, particularly in terms of knowledge translation activities and developing sort of toolkits that support the dissemination of research findings. So that's all I'd say for now. I'm sure that we need time for Q&A, Glenn, but I'll come back in and develop some of these points maybe later. Thanks.
Thank you, Noel. You've done a fantastic job of not just giving people an understanding of the work you're doing and how you're approaching it, but synthesizing some of the ideas from the other speakers as well. So beautifully done. Thank you. So here's my thought for conversation then. I don't know where I first saw this model. I like models because it, you know, helps to simplify complex things. And I'm really interested in the policy landscape, because for me, if the policy framework isn't there, then it doesn't enable the work to happen at any kind of significant scale, generally speaking. And there's a model from the policy world that kind of says there's kind of 3 basic ways of approaching a policy. If you're tackling, you know, one of those wicked problems, those like male suicide or men's life expectancy, the obesity time bomb, Dr. Myles Young, transforming masculinity, Kylie, helping parents sleep, Jacqui Macdonald, and just knocking out a men's health strategy for an entire continent, Noel. If you're tackling sort of these wicked social problems, there's generally sort of like three policy approaches. One is like the authoritative, where you have like one organization or one individual or a czar who comes along and basically is like a benevolent dictator for the benefit of all of us, decides what it is that we should be doing. Then there's the competitive approach, where actually the field is opened up a little bit more, but essentially special interest groups, you know, or individual large institutions, which is something you often see in like, you know, in the NGO space, often you'll see certain sectors dominated by a very powerful, wealthy NGO. Different parties compete, and therefore the strongest party prevails. Survival of the fittest. And then the Holy Grail, which everyone says we should do, but then the reality is it's bloody hard, is the collaborative model, where lots of different voices are heard and lots of different stakeholders are engaged and properly involved. And I think the hardest one of all seems to be if you look at the men's health space, either the hardest one or the one that we're least reluctant to actually engage with is actually men themselves. Often these kind of these conversations happen outside of men, not with men. So if you think about and it doesn't have to be about the policy landscape, it can just be that your realm, your domain that you own. Do you experience that pull between being the authority, having to deal with competitive interests or collaborative, and if so, what's your secret sauce? Dr. Myles Young, dictator, competitor, or collaborator?
Look. Sorry, Noel, you jump in.
No. My machine froze, so I wasn't sure what the question was talking.
Yes, I was just about to say the same thing. We just lost you just at the end, Glenn. Probably just the last 10 seconds. It was really building to something too, and I was ready to jump in.
Yeah. So the question is, in your own realm, do you find yourself tending towards more the author, the dictator, towards the competitor, or the collaborator, and what are the tensions which pull you in different directions when you're attempting to follow whatever path you're trying to follow?
Yes. Okay. Well, I probably should give you the disclaimer up front that I'm an early career researcher emerging, and I am nowhere near sort of ready to be an authority on any of these issues, particularly when I'm collaborating with these experts. So from that kind of early career perspective, I really appreciate the collaborative nature of these discussions, particularly in my case with this multidisciplinary team. Exercise, nutrition, psychology, psychiatry, men's health. There's definitely different tensions and different points of view. I'm a real believer in the value of robust debate, and I think there's so I'm not going to shy away from that, and I'm happy to sort of put my point of view into things. And I suppose that's where is always a good place to start, that sort of robust debate discussion. In research, another thing to note is that people are so busy, and even your collaborators will only be able to give you so much of their time. So I guess I'm still adjusting to, at some stage, I have to make the authoritative decision and choose which way to go forward. And it's still really important to have one or two mentors to help you do that. But I'm becoming more comfortable with that, having the initial discussion first, getting everyone's point of view on the table, and then, making my mind up and choosing a way to go. And, alluding to what Jacqui said, to really take ownership of the project, and you have to lead it. So at some stage, the penny does stop with you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Myles. So moving back towards dictator towards the end, after having gone through a process of robust collaboration. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good summary. What I was waffling on.
I'm putting words in your mouth. Now, Jacqui, Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium, right? So obviously, we're going to collaborate right across Australia. Fatherhood, is it all aspects of fatherhood? Where do you draw the line? Research, all approaches to research, and under what conditions do you start to allow everyday non-research Johnnies like me into the party? Where does the consortium begin and end? Yeah.
Excellent question, and we haven't worked it out yet.
Yeah.
So I guess we know where it began. Where it ends, in fact, we had a meeting only this week to talk about the next stages of it, because Because when you do something that resonates with people and people connect, people do see themselves as part of its future. And I mean, one of the things that at first our goal was to really bring people together, see whether we could collaborate, and it seems that we can. So now our question is, what's our sustainability model? And well, you were there, Glenn, where we had this really interesting discussion at our symposium where, you know, we got into a bit of trouble for not covering certain topics. You are calling yourself the Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium, and yet these are things that are really important in the fatherhood space, and you're not doing it.
Yeah.
And the truth is, none of us, you know, we are an organisation that's unfunded. We actually don't have a formal governance structure, or we're not incorporated. We don't take fees or anything. And these are things that we're talking about for the future. Do we need to do this? And if we do that, does it mean that we need to then actually represent a broader group of views and a broader number of domains around, you know, what it is that we, you know, step into in terms of policy and connecting with people in the community? What does that mean for us? And given that there's a small body of people who have the time to be committed, that's a big question to us. I mean, we're all doing what we can with our existing resources, and it seems to work that way. But there's a pull for us to grow and to be more formal and to collaborate more broadly. So I think, where does it end? Look, you know, that is the big question. We're in the process of working it out. In terms of collaboration at the moment, my feeling is I want to be, and I know Karen's in this discussion here with us as well, and she's on the steering committee as well. We've really talked about how what works for us is the fact that we are so inclusive, that every voice matters. And people feel really safe in that environment and connected to it. And we've had young researchers step in and come to the symposium and say, I found my home. This is my place where my research group is. I know I can feel accepted and connect here. So we want to keep that. But I guess we just need to, what I keep hearing people doing is telling stories about, and our story's evolving, and we just need to make sure the narrative is really clear as we go forward about what we can and what we can't do, I guess. And I don't know whether I answered your question or just rambled, but I'm still in a bit of flux about how this is moving forward. So I guess. Yeah,
you answered it in exactly an entirely appropriate way, which is there's not a clear answer. Right? Yeah. It's an evolving. I mean, I feel your joy and your frustration because the Australian Men's Health Forum, you know, men's health. Where does men's health start and begin? You know, well, we say it's all those things that keep you healthy. That's why we talk about improving the lives and the health. It's fatherhood, and it's housing, and it's relationships, and well, who's working to improve those things? Well, bloody everyone in different ways. And is it just, you know, is it boys or is it old men? It's both. Is it gay men and straight men? Yes. You know, is it about research? Of course, and practice, yes, and hearing the voice of lived experience, that too, you know. And the Australian Men's Health Forum has been for most of its life a voluntary organisation, so led by passionate volunteers with limited capacity in all the ways that human beings are limited by time and resource and skills and all the rest of it. And so we come to the end of 3 years of having a bit of funding where we've got 2 staff, essentially me and 2 part-time staff. And we take on something like, you know, this Men's Health Connected, which is a real intentional attempt to demonstrate that this is a forum, the Men's Health Forum, which provides a space for many conversations about men's health.
Incredible that you can do that for the full month and have day after day after day,
and still feel like we've only scratched the surface. And so, you know, and at some point then you have to draw back and go, we're only going to focus on this for now because we can't do it all.
something as well as just talk about it. So doing stuff takes time to step back and actually do it. But I can say one of the things that I think is when you talk about competition, I understand, I mean, in research, we have to compete for our money all the time. So it's in our blood. Well, it's forced upon us. Some of us actually would much rather just collaborate. But competition is forced upon us. But I think we are so much more successful by being inclusive and collaborating. The fact that you came to the Fatherhood Research Consortium and you've actually taught us a lot about how we can get our message out and connect with other groups, that has really strengthened us. And I hope that, you know, what we do can continue to strengthen the Men's Health Forum and all other groups around as well. It's what we can do together again more than what we can do apart. Yeah.
And Kylie, Noel, do you want to jump in?
Just one. I think the point you make there is really interesting about where does men's health begin and end, and like you could get kind of smothered in that, really, you know, because it's so complex on the one hand, but you have to get sort of tangible bits to kind of keep you sane. But like our initial men's health policy was incredibly broad. It had 5 or 6 other government departments with actions and recommendations, so it was highly aspirational and was never going to be achieved. And I say that now with a fair degree of honesty at this stage. But, and this is the key point, it did set out a vision for men's health, which was very kind of social determinants based, and it didn't box men's health into a very narrow sort of biomedical model. And I wouldn't swap that, even though any policy and analyst would have said that was incredibly aspirational with no budgets and all that. But it did set out our stall and our vision for men's health that was really important and allowed us to kind of to narrow later. So the second action plan that we developed was very much aligned to the Healthy Ireland national policy agenda. And it got much cleverer in terms of saying, well, you know, the cardiovascular disease is important for the country. Here's where men's health can play its part. Physical activity is important. This is how we engage with men through, we've had a program called Men on the Move, and we've had other examples this morning. Mm-hmm. So like, I do think we need to acknowledge and have some kind of principles and vision about how we define and conceptualize men's health. But then when you get to policy implementation part, we need to be pragmatic as well and see what's realistic and feasible.
Yeah, and I've just posted a link to that document in the chat box. Noel, the 2008 Irish policy. It would be probably one of my desert island books. You know, if I was restricted to men's health writing, because it is an extraordinary. I can sort of feel you map it going. It's all of these things, and we need to map it out, and you did.
We're very naive.
But you put it out there, which was like, you know.
And here's the other interesting thing. Like sometimes it takes like 10 years for something to happen. Like one of the actions in that was about having parental leave for fathers, you know, which we didn't have at the time. And like 10 years on, it's kind of like a drip feed. And I remember we had bilateral meetings with government departments to get them to kind of buy in. And one of the departments that was most difficult and said to us, like, what has this got to do with us, was the Department of Agriculture. And here I am this morning talking about 2 projects which are highly innovative, and the Department of Agriculture is fully invested now in men's health, but it takes time, so it doesn't always kind of happen overnight.
I think, is it possible that breadth of a policy, something that puts it out there, that's where the champions step in and say, actually, that's the bit that I can take forward, and this is where the immediate need is seen, you know, by a particular group of people who stand up in the fatherhood space. I mean, that happened in the UK, bringing about screening of partners of women who had a diagnosis of perinatal depression. There were just a few champions who said, this is the time, this is the moment, and we're just going to run with that and push and push and push. And next thing you know, you've got members of the royal family on the course, you know. But by having that broad space, people can see somewhere, that broad policy, people can see where they might fit in and take ownership of a particular. Take
ownership and see themselves as being part of that. Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, and I'm mindful. We just have Kylie. You've not had a go at this yet. Do you want to jump in on any of this?
I'm not sure what else I have to say. There's been a lot of different topics covered, hasn't there? So, but I think that idea of having community engagement through, like authentic community engagement at each part of the project is so important from even beforehand. And I guess what I would have talked about if I had a bit more time was this idea about kind of getting organised for the opportunity for collaboration. So building on relationships, lots of cups of coffees and informal conversations and connections so that you can have that engagement even before a project idea is formed, I think is so important.
Yeah, I think there's something there about the conversations you have before you start, which is, how many times do we see a kind of like a bit of work that's nearly complete and you kind of think, and someone asks you what you think, and you kind of think, well, I wouldn't have started where you started from. That's what I think. I think you need to go back to the drawing board. And, from an advocacy perspective, it's so frustrating to often see that and a process of thinking has gone so many steps down the line without anyone asking the question, what about how does this impact men, or how does this impact fathers? That's part, getting that thought about men's health or fatherhood or whatever it is much further upstream in terms of the thinking process, rather than constantly chasing policy or funding. One example from these 4 weeks, which has been the most exciting in terms of the system doing stuff for men's health, has been the work which Kylie, around primary health networks. And Noel, if you don't know, a bit like clinical commissioning groups, there's about 31 primary health networks around the country. So smaller than states and territories, but still quite large areas. But with that kind of like that commissioning process where they're expected to sort of like engage with their communities to commission. And we've probably got more individual projects going on that are focused on male suicide from different perspectives, different age groups, maybe veterans, Aboriginal men, young men, older men, around the country now, because somewhere in that process, men were identified as a population group which different areas should target. And so because someone at the very start of it, before they handed out the money, said one of the populations you should focus on is men, then further down the line, that process of collaboration between the health system and men in their local area and organisations already working with men has started to happen. But it was enabled at the starting point where someone put the thought into the system. And what was one of the really interesting stories for me that I tell about this is when certain PHNs had, for example, 3 population groups: Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, LGBTIQ+, and men. And they went through a normal process. We'll reach out to the networks of community groups that we already speak to, and we'll talk to them. Did it for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. Now we'll reach out to all our normal stakeholders for LGBTIQ+. And yeah, we've got those, and we'll talk to them. Now we're going to go and speak to all the organisations that work. Oh, hang on a minute. Who do we talk to when it comes to men? And there was no kind of like, no existing kind of like framework for engagement with men. And for me, in all of this work, I think that's particularly when you get to a large scale of any kind, our ability to engage and involve and access and work with men is probably one of the biggest missings that we have. And I think maybe one of the strengths of our 2010 National Men's Health Policy, and it was discussed in this morning session, was that while it was a bit clumsy and clunky and a bit all over the place in many ways, it did actually go on the road and talk to groups of men to inform the process. There was that collaborative process. And part of the challenge of collaboration is the thing that you end up with isn't that necessarily the thing that you as the sort of like the owner and the author want to come up with. But I've often said from my experience that and this came from my experience as like a consultant in strategic communications that would come in and come up with a big idea for a communications project, like campaigning against Heathrow Airport or something like that. That what I learned in the early part of my career was I just wanted to come up with a brilliant idea and then force it on people. What I learned was that a half decent idea that people came up with themselves was much better than a really brilliant idea which you enforced from the outside. And that's where I first learned about collaboration, that it has to, I don't know what you call that, it's like participative, isn't it, or whatever. So I feel I've rambled for far too long there, and I feel we should draw us to a close. What's a final easy question to get us out of this conversation and release us to the outside world? It's not an easy question, but it sounds simplistic. So what one lesson can we all take forward in terms of collaborating better? What's the one thing we need to hold in mind from your perspective? Your one word of wisdom in 15 seconds or less, or however long it takes. Your one thought of wisdom, Dr. Myles Young. What have you to teach us?
Well, I might again go from the early career perspective and potentially just say, look, the collaborations are there, but as Kylie said, it can start at a very low level. So just a conversation, an email, or a cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be a fully formed idea from the get-go, which can seem quite intimidating. So if you're kind of early in the business like me, that's where a lot of my great collaborations came from, just talking to someone at a conference for 5 minutes and then nurturing that relationship as you go. So start smaller and then it can grow into something bigger.
Yeah, that's beautiful. My one big lesson from this past year, but this month in particular, is to shift away from specific outcomes like running a gathering or, putting on an event, or even setting up a new group in some of the charities that I work for, all of which are important because they're tangible things. But actually what's more important is actually building relationships. And if putting on an event helps you build relationships, then fantastic. But if you're not building relationships, then what's the point? Frankly, frankly was the word I was looking for. Kylie.
My final words.
Yeah.
I agree with everything that Myles just said. It's all about the relationships, isn't it? It's all about building relationships and just reaching out to, community reaching out to researchers reaching out to organisations. And my favourite thing as a researcher is when an organisation or a community comes to me and says, we've got this problem, we need help solving it. Yeah. And I'm like, easy, I can do that. That makes my life easy and I love it. So, I think that's a good place to. So I'd love to see more of that happening.
Yeah, and for me, collaboration becomes easier when you know the strengths of different people, where where you agree and where you would disagree. And actually, one of my mottos used to be in my early days of collaboration was that let us focus on what unites us rather than what divides us. Let us first seek out what we agree on, then rather than seeking out what we disagree on.
Yes.
That collaboration, then you're looking for those overlaps and actually knowing, well, what are you strong at, so that when we build a team, we can each of us potentially all play to our strengths, I hope. Dr. Jacqui Macdonald, master collaborator in the fatherhood research field. What are your words of wisdom for us from your research sausage factory?
Well, I'm actually going to steal from Kylie, I think, because I heard her talking, when she was talking about relationships, she used the word authentic before. And I think that's absolutely critical. I mean, we all talk about the need to build collaborations, and I know that sometimes you review grants and you can see people who opportunistically connect to look better for a funding application. But when it's authentic, it really holds true, and it is much more sustainable. You and borrowing also from Noel, you share common values and a common passion, and that's actually what drives you to maintain that workload month and year after year, because it took us a couple of years to get those papers out together and to build that even as our first set of outputs. And the other thing that when you've been talking about relationships, absolutely agree that's critical, but it reminds me of that saying of something along the lines of luck is when preparation and opportunity come together. So it's that idea of those relationships actually being built on the ground, being there and ready for that moment when something happens. And, Glenn, you would have seen this, the Fatherhood Research Consortium has a Google group, and if anybody wants to join that, please feel free to go. I think somebody's posted our website there. But people all the time are sending out and information out to the Google group and just keeping people informed of what they're doing. But when we were first in lockdown, people said, this is a moment that we need to start researching what's going on here. And so people took that opportunity for an established collaboration to start building research programs around COVID-19. So those sorts of things, because they already exist, you're ready to move forward and do what matters when it matters.
That's great. And can I just acknowledge publicly, Jacqui, because I didn't respond earlier, that I personally have just learned so much from being a small part of the Australian Fatherhood Research Consortium. It's been a real privilege and a great learning experience for me to be around the work that you do. So thanks for that opportunity.
Thanks, Ben. We really value your contribution to it. So it's a mutual admiration society.
Well, there you go. This is what you get from collaboration. You get slaps on the back. Dr. Noel Richardson, bring us home. Collaboration in the world of men's health, particularly. So,
yeah, all of the things that have been said just now, and if there's one maybe extra little bit, I think it's the leadership and skill that's needed to single out like where there's a win-win for all stakeholders. So that everyone feels that they may have to compromise on some parts, but that there's something of value in the collaboration and partnership for them. And I think a key element of that is convincing people that it's a much more efficient and economical use of resources, that we work better in collaboration where others are committing resources, people, funding, whatever it is, and that I, as a person or as an organisation, can benefit from this multi-stakeholder approach much better than trying to do it on my own.
Yeah. Thanks, Noel. That's a really nice way to complete. And Noel, I've been aware of your work for a very long time, and I don't know how it's happened, but it's taken this long for us to connect.
And likewise, it's great to connect. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll cross paths hopefully sooner rather than later. Yeah.
Yeah, I've said a couple of times today that we have this absolute privilege in the English-speaking world of being able to stretch across different continents and different countries and different experiences, and there's a real massive potential as when you're operating in the Anglosphere to actually collaborate and cooperate. And now that everyone in the world and their granny has a Zoom account, there's no excuse, even with the time zones as you've demonstrated. We had Canada and the USA in this morning. We've had Ireland in this afternoon. There's no reason why we can't be having these international collaboration conversations and not waiting until we all get together at a physical meeting or a physical conference. So I hope we manage to find lots of useful and productive ways to bring conversations like today together. This has been the first ever Men's Health Research Symposium, and it bloody rocked. So I hope you enjoyed that session. Thanks to Dr. Myles Young, Dr. Kylie King, Dr. Jacqui Macdonald, and our international speaker. We didn't have to fly him in. We didn't have to put him up in a hotel. We just had to get him near an internet connection, and he did that himself. So thank you, Noel. And thank you everyone who's participated today. Thanks to all the speakers